Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to tell you all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Get early access to all of our interviews, including the monthly Chichester Chats with writer and comic book legend DG Chichester, new episodes of classic Capes and Lunatics shows, including The Quantum Zone, This, That, or the Third, and many, many more specials, all completely uncensored. Access starts for $3 a month, full video when you pledge $5 a month. Check out the link in our show notes or go to patreon.com/capesandlunatics. Hope to see you there. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another month of the Chichester Chats. It's me, Phil. Lilith is back. And, of course, that man of mystery and the internet, it is Mr. DG Chichester.
It's I was hoping you'd have the max headroom filter running, so I could do the stuttering good morning to Lilith.
Good morning.
I could just try to move like Matt Frewer, and do the. But I'll let you do the stop motion after.
All right. So yes, kids, this time we're going to talk some the Marvel Cybercomics. This the X-Men ones this time. So you're saying 80s or 90s. I'm pretty sure these were 90s.
Oh yeah,
I hadn't seen these, but I remember seeing like advertisements for go check out.
You must have not been an AOL kid, Phil. I remember these very vividly.
Oh yeah, this was AOL. This was an AOL anchor point. Yep.
Yeah, these were back in the days when I actually touched grass. So
Sorry, I'm a millennial. I've been chronically online since '97.
So yeah, I mean, I remember seeing ads like in the comics and stuff, but it really didn't give you a sense of like what they were like until I actually saw these again. Get less.
You have to remember this was cutting edge back in the day.
This was cutting edge.
No, I'm being really serious.
And
I liked them. I had no problem with them.
Yeah, no, I mean it's Lilith, that's a great point. And it's sort of like I never saw the ad, so I'm like it's news to me they ran ads. So that's interesting. But
I'm pretty sure what it was. I think it was just a generic picture of Spider-Man. It was like, a Marvel Cybercomics or something. Yeah.
Right. But somebody, I ran into somebody who actually worked on them as a production sort of, I guess, assistant at a signing. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the guy's name at the moment, but he's got his own comic and he was promoting his own comic at the store signing, which was great. But, he pointed out he had worked on them and he said, we really were pioneering digital comics. And it's true, that's not like let me reach for some kind of Goonie like credit for something. It's really true. It was both cutting edge in terms of what you could do in animation and what you could do in like limited, sort of sound sync ups and get it across a 14:4 28 K modem. For folks who haven't seen these were like limited animation, type of story chapters of comics, usually 4 or 5 chapters, each, but they were interactive. So you could advance the panels and pages in different ways by clicking, across them. And they were hiring, decent artists, decent writers. It wasn't who are these folks, but it was definitely trying to cram a lot through a very, very small pipe because at that point it wasn't, megabits per second. It was, kilobits, a little tiny little bit of information. And they were created in this animation interactivity program called Director, which was pretty obscure and powerful, but very hard to work in as well.
Yes, the kids won't understand. To read these comics, kids, you had to hang up your house phone before you could read these comics.
Yes.
Worse than that, it's built on Shockwave, which RIP to the millennials who know all about how the discontinuation of Flash animation destroyed the internet for a couple years.
Yeah, no, I mean it was Flash and Shockwave were extensions to that Director. Or Flash was kind of a standalone thing, in its own way, but they integrated and they allowed for compression of, all these images, all these sounds, and then syncing them up and streaming them in a way that really jump-started a lot of these kind of cool games and interactivity and animations and such. But they were extraordinarily memory hungry, buggy things as well. So they would, they would crash computers and, and crash browsers. But I want to click on the little moving pixel. But these were, these were fun, stories, to work on. And for me, they were just, moments I hadn't thought about for a while. But ultimately, as all things do, these formats not just went out of vogue, right, Lilith, in terms of like, oh, they're not using them anymore. You can't access them anymore at all. You cannot run those director files anymore. There used to be self-running versions of them. You could download them from America Online when that was like a standalone internet service, and then but they don't run on modern day computers anymore. If you've updated them to 2025 or even 2001, as far as I know, these things stopped working. And so unless you have a really old operating system running, and so what I had done at one point, seeing that was kind of happening, is I ran each animation and captured them as video, which is crude as all get out, but it sort of gives you an idea of how the story advanced and looked.
Which is kind of how we read these, or else, yes, these would have been lost to time. And
yeah, they're completely gone. I mean, Grimworks, who was the name of the developer, like, blanking on the guy's actual name, very talented coder, was good enough to send me the original files at one point, because I knew how to work a director in a sort of a layman's sort of way. I was interested in what you could do with that, and so he sent me the development files, which had all the assets, all the images, all the animations, all the sound effects, all the code. And so I could go in and tweak or look at those in Director itself. But again, after a point, if I was updating my machine or I was buying a new computer, it wouldn't run anymore. And at one point, somebody from Marvel called me or contacted me and said, you're running these animations on your YouTube channel. Do you have the original files? I said, well, I do. So does Grimworks, but you should have them too. And if you don't, be happy to talk about giving them to you for a price.
As you should.
But I never heard back from them after that. So I don't know what they were thinking of doing, or maybe they're going to bundle them up or recreate them, and which they should. They were.
It's really a great piece of history, honestly.
Yeah, and Fabian did a few.
Got Larry Hama.
Larry
of people.
Hama did.
Gross.
Yeah. There was like there's some pretty extensive group of people who were working on them. And but right now, and I don't know that anybody captured like theirs. I just self-interest did mine.
You're ahead of your time. You were thinking. I wish a lot more people like a lot of the history of the internet's like actually literally dying and lost. Actually, it's really sad. So.
Yeah, and you sort of
think,
think
people thought, oh, the internet's forever. I'm like, babes, no,
right,
really.
Right, and some things feel that way, but you get to the point at which at some point JPEG will not be like the visual standard. So all these images we have saved, it's going to be.
Remember Photo Bucket Apocalypse? I do.
Yeah. Right. So they'll
shout out to all the GeoCity vlogs.
Exactly. Exactly.
Again, it's almost another casualty of, I call it the 90s vortex, where stuff from the 90s just disappeared. Like last episode, we were talking with the guys. Like you said, you tried to get that terror artwork, and it was gone.
Yeah, that vanished. But these these were I'm glad I was able to save these and like I said, recreate them in that video. I mean, I think you probably doubled the viewership when you clicked on them, but I mean, I don't think anyone's ever like looked at them over time. But I mean, they are fun. I mean, they're decent stories. The artwork certainly was simpler by 90 standards. Certainly, I know that the artists were charged with having to do simpler pencil inked renderings and more flat colors, because again, they were trying to push a lot through a very small connection, and get as much going as possible. So there'd be no way that a rendered image, a heavily rendered image, would be able to, fit those standards. These things had to fit in a very small file size. And I want to say something like, 2 megabytes or something. I mean, it was really small. I think they were trying to get them down to fit on like a 3.5-inch floppy at one point.
Oh, jeez.
Which is which is crazy. Which is an old transport mechanism, kids. An oversized USB stick.
But this is literally the progenitor. It's like the precursor to Marvel Unlimited, which is just like so fascinating to me. Like I always think of Marvel like kind of like they try these trends, and it's just like, oh, usually they're like kind of behind, but like they're actually ahead of the time on this one.
They were, and then they let it drop. It
Yeah.
was, which was sad. I mean, it was definitely a kind of a subdivision of Marvel, like
but I think a lot of things with Marvel, especially in that mid to late 90s, where it was a lot of like change happening at the leadership level, is probably a lot of cause of this as well. And then also you have to think about the rights and things like that as well, which is kind of probably like the downfall of this essentially too.
Oh yeah. No, well, I think it's also like it was really, it was outside the purview of most people, right? As well, like we've talked about with some other things. Marvel editorial had enough trouble figuring out the Wang word processing computers that had come in at one point, to do typesetting on. That was scary enough. Maybe they were just getting Macs in the office. Maybe at that point, I'm not quite sure they were. And whatever was going on in this internet zone, was in 96, 97, right? This was not well known. So these guys, Suzanne Gaffney, was the first editor of these, and then I think was replaced by Greg Sanderson. But her office was this office on another floor, as I remember it. And so they were like a shadow operation, doing this stuff. I mean, the first time I brought up, and this is really going back, the stuff that I was doing on the internet, like Genie, which was an early like message board sort of system, and CompuServe, and then AOL. And I was, self-identifying, oh, I work at Marvel, I edit this, I do this. And, people would kind of light up a little bit. And I remember going to one of the promo directors and like saying, there's a lot going on in terms of conversation, around comics and Marvel and stuff. And, we should get in early. It's like, what are you talking about? Like that's not going to go anywhere. Stop wasting my time. So I think these digital comics, these cyber comics.
I think cyber comics sounds so much better than webisodes. Like, I'm just gonna be so real with you. Like, I miss when we used to like really want to be into that cyberpunk aesthetic.
Yeah,
I miss it so much.
it's right. I mean, and Cyberpunk 2077 redeemed itself, after a couple of iterations on the video game front. So it's a good word again.
Well, it was just a matter of, optimization, I think,
I think it was a matter of going from crude block shapes to the actual rendered, graphics they promised in the first thing, where it's now a pretty awesome game. But I think, that even again, in terms of much like Epic, was a separate division that nobody really kind of acknowledged in Marvel editorial because they didn't understand what they were doing. I think there was a little bit of that with these cyber comics, and I think, if I remember correctly, which I don't, but I'm guessing, this X-Men story, which involves the original X-Men team, like a small original X-Men team. I don't know that was the original idea, but I think that was probably, quote unquote, forced on us because it wouldn't impact or have to align with current continuity, right? It felt like it was outside the zone. And when we get to the Spider-Man one, if we do a future episode on that one. The Spider-Man one is the same thing. It's an earlier Spider-Man. And
I think that was a lot of the common threads. I know the other X-Men, the Ravagers of Apocalypse, was based on the video game.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I thought that was really neat. I think that was one of the first ones I actually stumbled across. And I think like probably like 7 years ago, I stumbled across your YouTube with all these on it. Like I don't know how I got there. I was on some rabbit hole, but I was just like, and now that when we brought it up last year, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember these over on his YouTube. So
yeah,
funny.
they sort of, I figured that was the best way to kind of, I mean, I have copies, outside of YouTube for when, YouTube gets banned, um, oh, good luck TikTok creators. But, um, but I figured just get them out there, why not? It can't hurt. And if you put in a little bit of effort and you sort of, sit back and watch them and kind of understand how they progress. Again, they're solid stories. I mean,
I love the Blade one though.
Oh, the Blade one is, the Blade one was really, really a lot of fun. I don't know if the Blade one was the first one I did though, but it might have been.
So was that part of it where they were just like, kind of keep, like you were saying, the original X-Men, keep them like timeless so they can kind of like just like, hang there forever.
No tea, no shade. Colossus. We all know how I feel about Colossus.
That costume.
Well, I think it's, when you're doing a story like that with, whatever was going on in regular X-Men continuity and all the convoluted, craziness of the big team and the modern team and stuff, and that was a highly, if coordinated or managed, group of editorial and creators.
Only imagine. I mean, you did have Gambit and Rogue, so that's all that really matters.
Right. So they were I'm sure if they had said, well, we want to do an X-Men thing, the first thing was no at all. You can't play with our toys. But if it's an earlier version of the X-Men, then that continuity doesn't matter. And, it's not going to affect us now. And we can pretend it's like a story.
I think they even tell that to Tom DeFalco with his Wolverine stuff, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I believe that was a thing too. So.
So the whole mission statement just like, oh hey, we want an online presence or something to drive traffic to the website, or?
Well, I don't know that there was a Marvel website at that point.
I mean, it's just like, well, I think it was kind of like to get at the youths, because like you have to remember how massive AOL was back then.
Right.
Like, that was a major get. Like I said, I saw it. I remember a lot of people my age really remember these. Deep in the back of the recesses, if you mention it, like, oh yeah, I remember that.
No, AOL was discs or originally floppies, and then
it came in the mail.
Or a CD, and every magazine almost that you could find at a newsstand had a deal that it was bundled in with the magazine. Free sign up. Free CD. Put it in your computer system and watch it boot up, and you're on AOL. And as far as I think most people were concerned, they were starting to hear about the internet, but they thought the internet was America Online.
Yep.
They thought that's what the internet was, even though that was just a portal.
One of the best branding deals, branding blitz marketing I've ever seen in my life.
Absolutely.
Now look at it.
And yeah, right. And and a great game of like, whatever, 3-card Monty in terms of the people who profited off it. And then
it's funny because Warner Brothers ended up owning it eventually. And
then AOL owned Warner Brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. At one point, their cap was bigger than like Time Warner, right? And it was AOL Time Warner, right? Yeah. They rebranded themselves. But it was, I think it was just, and there were so many sections to AOL, that acted like they were different components of interest groups. Cooking, or there was a bunch of recipe downloads and recipe message boards, and so there was a comic section, and I think there was a place for Marvel to do a limited stake in the ground that we have a digital presence, we have a cyber presence, we're with it, we're aligned with Wired magazine and Mondo 3000 and all these other things that we're starting to try to define the burgeoning internet culture. And yeah, again, credit to
shortly
them.
after this, they actually finally did do their website, the Marvel Online website, shortly after the launch of these.
Oh yeah, okay. So that was, yeah. I imagine the timing was that because it wasn't available through the website. There wasn't a website; it was available through AOL. And so I think it was just trying to be where the people were, Phil, and just to look like we're doing something, with it, which was again pretty extraordinary given the stodginess of some responses to digital things and cyber things, that they took this leap and did so many of them comparatively, and did a decent quality job, against a lot of these stories and art and such.
I think one that a lot of people might remember if they really think about it is probably those Marvel Milk Maniacs, because we had that whole got milk thing back back in my day. Your parents forced cow's milk down your throat because they thought you would drop dead of osteoporosis.
That's right. That's right.
Man, those dairy farmers in California really had a hook in their industry.
You can't eat peanut butter without milk,
Exactly. Yeah, so I don't know. I found that X-Men, like, how did you so it's 4 parts. How did you guys determine that was going to be 4 parts, or is that just how it worked out?
That was just how it worked out. I mean, that's what Suzanne, if she edited this one, or that was sort of the standard they had sort of like established before I got involved with them. And I had gotten involved because I wasn't getting, any work on stuff. Things had dried up, with the collapse of certain things, within Marvel. And I wasn't doing a very good job of, selling myself or lining up other things. And but my interest was in this digital stuff. I had I'd probably been to the game shows at that point, trying to sell myself as a writer, and I had been teaching myself director and some of these other programs because I wanted to see what you could do with storytelling and and interactivity in that way. And so I felt like I knew enough, um, to kind of get by. Like I could understand the director interface, which was pretty complicated.
So is
And
this the foundation of basically how you got into like the marketing and advertising field, essentially?
not so much that, but it definitely was a little bit. I mean, it was definitely an outreach into some of that area. But I had gone into Suzanne pitching myself as more of a coder. Like I said, like I've seen what you're doing with these things. I know you're using Director. I know you're using Shockwave and Flash and such. I know, some of that. Here's some examples of things I've done. Would you be open to doing, some, having me do some coding, some of the development stuff here? And she looked at me and like said, well, maybe, but why wouldn't you just want to write them? So credit to Suzanne for like, seeing through my, my cruddy, depressed attitude about myself and sort of identifying a much better path to get into them. So, I think then, we started to talk about some different ones. I don't remember which one was the first, of the 4 or 5 that I did, but, I think they had that 4-chapter kind of establishment. I think they came out weekly, maybe. I don't remember, but there wasn't like a huge gap between them. So we just then started to kind of talk about different things, and then they had they definitely had a format. So many quote unquote pages. So much interactivity per page. Meaning you'd click on something and there'd be a little limited animation of like whatever the Cyclops' optic blast, would go from not there to like click on it and like, with a weird sound effect, that wasn't quite synced up, In a lot of ways, they were like the old like 60s,
Yes.
Marvel cartoons, Dr. Bruce Banner belted by gamma rays,
Yeah, where they would take a panel and they would like move like
Yeah,
someone's
exactly.
arm
Like,
would swing or something. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Back to the Max Headroom stop motion.
So, what were the challenges of like writing one of these as compared to like a regular comic where you just like, did you feel limited in like what you could do, or Or
No, actually, I was really charged up about them. I mean, you were limited, obviously, in terms of quote unquote, I don't know what we called them, but call them pages, for want of a different thing. There were less of those, and then you were definitely chaptering them out, so you were having to have like cliffhangers, not at the end of an issue, but like at the end of a mini episode. Probably the biggest challenge was like thinking through those, call them animation beats, like you just do an establishing shot, and then in the same panel or whatever, like I said, a light beam would come down, or something would fall off the table, or whatever it was, and then you were writing that out, for the artist in different ways. Of I won't say of all the scripts I wish I still had, but I wish I had one of these just to sort of see how I would have sequenced that out, to the artist to say, we need 3 elements for this page. We need Cyclops standing there. We need another one of the same angle with the blast, there. And then Grimworks would take those different pieces and then layer them up like you would in Photoshop nowadays, if you think about it, and then sequence those out as the animated beats. So that was probably the biggest thing, was like thinking through, how do you keep this interesting and what happens? And I think I was also indicating sound effects, that might play out, sound of the beam, or, a little musical riff or something. But this is what I was really interested in. I mean, so it wasn't, to me, it was exciting to do it, because these were all things that I was sort of saying when I'd go to pitch myself to the digital things, or went to the the E3 game shows, and I was talking about interactive comics. This felt like, oh, this is the opening salvo for stuff like this. But it didn't really continue in that way, but it certainly ran a good try at things.
I mean, I'm sure you'll tell me no, but I would think your name was like at top of the list, because you were always like, seemed like you were up on like the new technologies and stuff. And
yeah, I think I was. I wasn't smart enough with that to make a shit ton of money on it, but I mean, which I should have bought the Burger King URLs, and sold it back to them, and that kind of thing. But I don't know how many people like really knew that. I mean, a certain cadre of people were certainly aware that I was involved with that or knowledgeable about that. But again, as a sort of a shadow operation, not shadow operation, but a little bit of a separate operation, out of this Cybercomics office. It wasn't like a full court press. And I, again, had went to Suzanne, knowing she was doing this, and pitching myself from a developer point of view, and her being, again, savvy enough to sort of say, well, you're a writer, why don't you write the damn story? And it's like, yes, that's right. Which ultimately was far more, enjoyable, to do that.
mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, I saw, I think, maybe one ad or so, but yeah, it didn't seem like they really promoted them a lot. Again, maybe if you're online, they were, you were more aware of them. But I just think in like the X-Men comics, the Spider-Man comics, they could have been like, oh, hey, you want to see more
Right.
Spider-Man, more X-Men?
Right.
Yeah, go jump
Go
on
check it
that.
out.
They weren't too hip to corporate synergy back then.
I
So
know
Did they, when you went on,
those intranets, and you got this, that stock image from the 80s and 90s of the kid like actually standing like on a surfboard surfing the internet.
right, or like, like kind of typing at the computer with like, like the same stock images they use when people use like, VR now.
Mhm.
When you went on AOL, Lilith, do you remember when you would go to the opening like login screen or something, or the first quote unquote homepage? Was there ever like an advertisement or a push
when
to
they were
them?
when it first launched, like at the beginning of it, they go, hey, check out this in this section of AOL. They did
Okay.
it first. When
Okay.
like the first, I'd say like couple of months, and
All
then
right. So there was some of that. All right.
yeah, because I mean, like I said, there was a lot of places to go on the internet back then. It wasn't just the same 3 corporations running the internet, but
Yep.
AOL was the hub. So like you get into your rhythm, you launch your little messenger, you start clicking around, talking to your friends, like, hey, I'm here, I'm in this room, I'm doing
Right.
this.
Right. Like, yeah, AOL
But yeah,
Messenger.
it was a big deal for the use. I really feel like that was like one of the really first big pushes that like carve out a space on the internet for kids, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's what I really remember.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good that they did have that opening, push to it, but there weren't. Certainly, there were a lot of people dipping their toe or starting to kind of experience, the internet or the faux internet, through that window. But whether they were all wanting to jump on digital comics, Phil, I don't know.
No, that was definitely still a ways away, but it was a promising entry.
Right, right. No, I mean there was. I mean, these things.
I just don't think the capability of the internet at that, like, it wasn't, it's just a little too soon.
It was, and it was. Yeah,
You
I
know what?
mean, it was.
I thought that exactly too. Reading these, I'm like, they were probably ahead of their time, is what it
Yeah,
was.
it definitely was.
It
Looking
did,
back
yeah.
at it.
You look at it now, and it's sort of like it's super crude in some ways, but it was ahead of its time at that point in time. Where it was really pushing what the technology could do, and it was saying, how do we effectively tell a story that is not just a web comic, right? You weren't just scrolling through the panels like today's web comics are. It was trying to kind of think about a limited sort of interactivity to kind of involve the the reader. I hate the word user, but I mean, the reader, in the experience, so that their clicks and their no taps at that point, but their clicks or their swipes or whatever else, would trigger something else, so they'd feel like they were part of the story.
If I remember right, they were like 8 pages, quote unquote, long.
That sounds about right. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like the right kind of beat, because then you get a 32 page comic, out of
Yeah.
it, and then you'd have the chance for the cliffhangers, for those 8 page beats. So that sounds about right. Even though that, again, I don't know if we define them as pages, but we probably did to some
Panels,
extent. But
slides.
then,
I don't
yeah,
know.
but then you would stack it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was a screen. Might have been maybe we were smart enough to say screens, because the screens would have, maybe one big panel, or might start as one big image, and then 3 panels would come down and stack over it, to kind of do, that kind of build of a moment. I mean, it was kind of interesting, actually, the way that it would unfold. And um, again, time capsule wise, I wish I had one of those scripts to sort of understand how we sequenced it out.
Do you think you wrote like the full story and then they just broke them out, or were you
Um,
doing it the 8 pages at a time?
no, I mean, yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't remember. Feels like we might have done the full thing. It would have been more sane to do the full thing and then, break it up. But I don't know. I don't remember what the schedule was, or how we kind of defined that. Um, but I don't even know if I did. I write. I couldn't have, if I wrote them as plots. It was No, I don't think I would have written them as plots. I think I would have written them as scripts, just to be able to, you know, create all that sequencing, right? You're kind of like not leaving that to the imagination of the artist. You're having to say again, the Cyclops optic blast is the second beat, right? The second animated, beat of that panel. So there was a lot of that, or poor Marvel girl is tied up, and the second panel is electrical, whatever flares come around as the faux, um, spoiler alert, kids, the faux Professor X, tortures her or something like that. So, um, but yeah, it's definitely it was a bit of navigation to make it happen, but it was a lot of fun, as I recall.
Yeah, and was there like a list of characters? They're like, we want people to work on these ones, because it seemed like it's the big ones. It's the X-Men,
Of course,
Spider-Man, I thought
obviously.
Daredevil, Captain America, and Iron Man. I'm like, so were they just like, yeah, we want whoever does this to work
Well,
on these
don't forget Nick
characters?
Fury and Black Widow. I think that was one of
Yeah, the
Mel's.
Nick
Oh
Fury one is
yes,
one of
yeah,
my
yeah,
favorites.
yeah, yeah.
But no, I don't think, definitely they were going for more high profile characters. I mean, I think I but there was a pitch process to it, so there was the Blade one, I think they were going to do. I think I grabbed that. And maybe in that conversation with Suzanne, that might have opened the door to the Spider-Man one or something, like that, because that was one they wanted to do. But it wasn't like it was a given. It wasn't suddenly like I was the main Cybercomics writer and I had my pick, of anything, or we were going to work with this. I remember, I think I pitched the Daredevil and Nick Fury one, to her, and she hadn't made a decision for a while on it. And then finally I saw her at like some, New York City party, one of those like things you go up like stairs and it's kind of like a dive bar, grunge apartment sort of thing. It's like, hey, Suzanne, and then she might have been on her way out, at that point. But I remember her saying at that party, I sort of like lightly said, hey, what's going on with those stories? And she was like, yeah, let's do them, which was, so she, was either feeling really good or, she didn't really care. But that was sort of, I remember the approval process on those, but it wasn't, I think like anything, you're doing your more prominent characters, and Nick Fury and Daredevil, not necessarily more prominent, at that time, but maybe because I pitched them and I had a solid approach to the story and I had the association with Daredevil, that might have, and Nick Fury for that matter, so that might have just given it a little bit of extra bump on those fronts.
Yeah, if I remember right, there's a Deadpool one too. They
Did
had
Fabian?
one for Heroes Reborn. Like it was like literally took place in between the issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did Fabian do the Deadpool one? I imagine.
I can't really remember, but I want to say no.
Oh, okay. I know he did.
If I remember, I think it might have been Joe Kelly, if I remember right.
Okay.
Oh, he might have been doing it
writing
a regular book
because it was like right at that 2000 part. So
right. Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see how they compared. Again, we'll never know probably at this point, but I wonder how they wrote them. Because there wasn't any template. It wasn't like Suzanne said, "Well, here's how these things have to be done." I sort of figured it out as I was doing it, and she just accepted that. So I don't know if other people were doing it differently, and then maybe leaving it more up to the artist to sort of interpret everything, and then just writing it backwards. But hard to say.
So do you think maybe you had more creative freedom with those just because like the higher ups maybe didn't understand, what these actually were, or what the technology was, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, we've talked about this before and other things. I mean, I rarely, if ever felt creatively constrained,
Yeah.
On most anything. I mean, I know it's du jour to sort of like say, oh, I was like, compartmentalized and not allowed to do this. And Marvel does everything by committee. And, maybe in a lot of instances they do. And certainly there were conversations where, probably the most infamous one, was I remember we were pitching like, one of the Midnight Suns, follow-ups and, for one of the big crossovers, and somebody from editorial, in the middle of it said, like, oh, we can't go that way. This is too sci-fi. That's too sci-fi horror. And it's like we all looked at each other like, do you know what the Midnight Suns is? Like,
street level, Dan, street level.
But no, I don't remember any constraints on these, except for maybe, like I said, I mean, constraints in terms of, yes, the technical format of it. And maybe we went from, hey, we're doing an X-Men story, we're doing an original X-Men story, or we're doing a Spider-Man story, we're doing, no, he's got to be young teen Peter Parker sort of things. But those are the conditions of the test, as James T. Kirk might say. It's sort of like, they're just like the parameters, and then you work with it. So once you had those established, it was kind of off to the cyber races. There wasn't any interference, just in terms of, does it make sense to Suzanne or whoever the editor was, on those things in the moment.
I guess I'm always having the back of my head, just those few stories where they told you, oh, tone down the bloodshed, Dan, tone it down,
Yeah, no, we never got to that. And, the Blade one is kind of bloody, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, Blade one, he got that all out. He got it all out of his system on that one.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal, that little, like, one episode Blade one,
It's pretty neat that it's tied into the movie.
It is.
That was really neat.
It is, and it's such a hardcore movie, and loved the hell out of the movie, and so it was a lot of fun to do that Blade, little Blade episode. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's possible to do anymore, but I'd love to see one in this format, just like you do like a Hellblazer or a Hellraiser story or something, just with the blood. Here comes the blood. Boom.
yeah, I mean, I don't think they've ever still cracked, and maybe they never will because they don't care. Like digital comics have sort of moved over to, the hoopla, Marvel
Just
Unlimited.
archiving and monetizing.
Digital scan of it, yeah.
Digital scan, the biggest thing seems to be, does it zoom in and out of the panels? Like, right, you can look at it full page or look at it like panel by panel. Or it's a web comic where, you're pretty much scrolling from top to bottom and, going
it's
through.
2025 and we don't even have flying cars, so.
No, true. Well, some people do, they call them drones over in New Jersey or whatever. But I mean,
they do have those 2 people cars that turn into drones. You're right.
Right.
I don't have $300,000 to spend though. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, as my son said, if it's got wings and propellers, it's not a flying car. It's a plane, and it's a little plane you park in your garage. And but I think, yeah, nobody's like played in this space. And when I was trying to pitch myself at like the game shows and everything, I would always drop the term interactive comics. Oh, interactive comics, it's a big area for people to explore. And people would always nod their heads. Like, oh yeah, because it sounds right? It sounds like, man, that's something. But I didn't know what it was. I was just using the term to try to open like a door, and nobody I was talking to, really
Susan
knew.
Fernald's second episode is a web.
Yeah,
it's a cyber comic.
But it does feel like that there is something, to your point, Lilith. The weirdness and the fun of the internet, has largely gone away in favor of like, everything being owned by 3, corporate entities, more or less, and the weirdness and that fun thing of where you'd visit a new website and there'd be this cool new way of storytelling or interacting with a giant blue dot or something is largely gone away. So you have to kind of wonder if there's going to be a rediscovery of that.
I feel like Gen Alpha is like totally gonna bring back Web 1.0, and I'm so here for. I'm like, there's this site called NeoCities, which is like kind of like dedicated to like bringing back like GeoCities, and I'm so excited. And then there was like a couple of years ago this person who recreated MySpace.
Okay.
So yeah, like I totally think like the aesthetic of Web 1.0 and the simplicity and everything not always being so, especially with this push towards censorship of the internet, I really feel like Gen Z and Gen Alpha just aren't having it, and we might actually get a resurgence of it. So
yeah, and that might be a place where people want to try out a different
and really re-spark that creativity for the next generation.
Because it's there. I mean, I think that there's something about that exploratory. I mean, this is what I always push in marketing when I worked in the digital groups. Was the interactivity had been lost.
I mean, think about it. VR is so accessible with the, say what you want about Meta, but I will say that Meta Quest 3S has made VR so inexpensive, relatively comparative to everything else, and easily accessible.
Absolutely.
Then why not? Why not start playing with that again?
Right. I mean, there's still no killer app, I don't think, for VR, but it does sort of.
Well, not for MetaQuest. But
no,
maybe if you want to shell out a little bit more money in a couple of the other spaces, yeah, I think like, I'd say VR chat actually would be a great place to start and base your, like, if you wanted to get into the interactivity of it, I think that would be a great like base to start on. But yeah, there's no real killer app because it's just, we don't have really good cheap hand tracking yet. Once hand tracking happens and it's at a really cheap, affordable level, like it's a good start on the 3S. I think that's where everything's really gonna pick up and take off.
Right.
Because it's still very clunky. You can still get motion sickness. You have to spend quite a bit of time in VR to kind of get over that.
Right.
So once they fix a few of the quirks, I really feel like that's going to be the space, and people should really like start working on that. Hint.
But that could be, think of like one of these comic style things in a VR, approach. Now I'm seeing these panels and these screens, full sized, and now those elements, the cutout of Colossus or the cutout of Cyclops or whatever. They could be different layers, and they could be moving past you or coming in from the side.
3D.
almost like, what's that?
3D
Holograms.
Yeah,
I've
but
been
yeah,
so
but like,
desperate for hologram,
yeah,
real life hologram.
so these things could be sort of like surrounding you in a way that could be, but
like
it
you're
has to
sitting
be
in the room,
thought
yeah.
through. You have to think
Yeah.
through the experience and not just, throw it up there and like, like,
That
again,
is the
like,
thing, that it's going to be a little more expensive than this endeavor for sure. But I think this
mhm,
endeavor was probably pretty expensive, thinking about the time of it is and the
right.
accessibility of those particular programs.
Like there was some interactive comics, that were done in between that were playing with this idea, but they again seem to have fallen out of fashion, you know, and just going back to the panel in, panel out, type of thing. Maybe because of the expense and the additional time it takes to think through it all and then create it all, because you got to create assets for all those, pieces. Maybe now with, and this might be a oxymoron, but good AI, and I don't mean AI generating images, but I mean using AI to sort of
Speed up
make things,
processes and
yeah, right, to be able to cut an image out of a background is now, in some instances,
literally they give it to you for free.
yeah, and that's amazing to me, and that's the way a tool should be. Like suddenly I don't have to spend, you know
Tedious amounts of time
30 minutes
in
masking something.
Photoshop cutting out
Right,
the image, and yeah.
right. And that's what used to be the big thing, right? With some of the interactive comics that followed this, where it wasn't just assets being created, but I knew like full page stuff that had already been done. Then somebody had to go in and cut out the images,
Oh
right? That's what,
wow.
when you look at even trailers, right, on like Kickstarter, where people are doing the trailers for their their new comics, and you've got the layered, that's the thing, right? The layered sort of pieces and everything kind of animating at different sort of parallax, zones. I'm imagining they have to go in and cut those out from the big art piece to be able to kind of create those layers and then animate them at different points in time.
I mean,
um
but like things like Blender, like I'm just saying, there's so many like easily accessible tools too. Like I'm just so surprised that
yeah.
like it fell out of vogue, I
Well,
guess.
but maybe to your point, maybe, a generation comes in that is looking at these tools in different ways. Not that they're going to be inspired by these things, because they probably don't even know they exist until they see our podcast. Um, but uh, but I would hope that there'd be something there. I mean, Flow, that animated film about that cat that just won the Golden Globes, I think, for best animated film, was made in Blender. I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
which is amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I think it looks pretty cool. Um, so I would hope that somebody would think about, ways to kind of play with that interactivity that is not just a full animation, because I think that's, to me, that's interesting. But maybe that's just because I like poking around in cyberspace. Um,
I mean, and again, it was like back then, it was like such the early days of the internet. I don't think anyone knew what they had. And again,
oh no,
it was the
yeah,
Wild West. Everyone was just exploring. Now you look for something, you just do like a Google search or something. But
right,
back then
right.
it was I
Axe
remember it just
Jeeves, my friend. Axe Jeeves.
Geez, right. But it was also like we were talking about the weirdness before. I mean, you could go from a news site to like, some weird MySpace or GeoCities, or just, an unusual design or an approach to how somebody was representing themselves through their website. Whereas now 90% of things are, a Wix, big image up here, three boxes down here, parallax scrolling as you kind of
Templates,
like
which
go
is
down the
great.
page.
But like I said, MySpace, like I learned how to like basically code on MySpace, and
Yeah,
that's what like how come I like got into coding and take it further Tumblr and like make templates and stuff like that. Like it's just they don't encourage that anymore. It's just like here
no.
you go, here's a template. You don't have to be as creative. I mean, it's great for people that aren't technical, but like that kind of sparked the interest for at least my generation. I know a lot of coders out in out in the valley, that started
Hmm.
with MySpace.
Right, right. And at that point, you also had to like learn to pick it apart to be able to do more with it,
Yeah.
right? I want that image on the right instead of the left, which doesn't sound like a big deal at all, but that was you had to crack it open and figure out what the code was to shift that image over. And in the process of doing that, you
You
probably
taught
learned,
yourself something new
yeah,
that you can have.
and learned three other things or got intrigued about three other things. So it was definitely a good jumping off point, I think, for a lot of people in that regard. Now, some things now are a lot simpler, and some of them are too simple, maybe. But but you'd hope that the ease would not just be, look, I made a cat eating ramen because I just typed those words in, but it would actually encourage people to want to do, something more, right? With a
Yeah, that's my whole thing with like ChatGPT. It's like it's like people want to use it as a tool. They're not interested in how it actually works. I think that the premise of the large language model is really fascinating, like the stuff behind it. Not
Mhm.
so much what it spits out, but the
Right,
work that actually went into it to get to that point is fascinating to me. Not necessarily the tool itself.
right,
People
right.
are fascinated by the tool. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and if you use the tool in the right way,
Yeah.
or it can be a sounding board perhaps for something, or to jumpstart something, that's great. But if you're using the tool full out, just like write me a 10-page,
Yeah, the
whatever.
generated AI slop on Amazon books, it's just so
Oh
disappointing.
my
Like,
God. Oh my,
humanity, you're disappointing.
or you just go to like God, look up a recipe, site, and it's just
Oh,
and you get this,
yeah.
400 screen long thing of like,
I
it's
literally
just
have an
AI
extension that
slop.
calls "Just get to the point, Susan."
Exactly. Is there
Like
one?
that's the extension. It takes you straight down to
Really?
wherever like the ingredients in the process
Oh,
is of
let
those
me
things.
send me that link because I need that. Like, but yeah, these were definitely like, cool to work on. And we had, well, the point they pulled the plug, um, we were actually starting to talk about like doing more just interactive toys, which I thought was really
Oh,
interesting. Like we were
you talking
like I
about
had
Teddy
pitched.
Ruxpin, or what are we
Not
talking here?
quite, no, not quite that creepy. But but
Furbies? Like what are we talking? Tickle
but
me
there was
Elmo.
I don't know that we came up with a name for them, but I was like pitching like the idea of like an interactive Daily Bugle or an interactive Nick Fury's
Oh,
briefcase. So
Nice.
imagine it was, like it would have been the equivalent, I guess, of like a Hogwarts newspaper, but you'd have just the Daily Bugle, and you'd be able to, you'd be able to click on different points in the paper, and things would come to life. You'd have, animated video ads, or you'd hear J. Jonah Jameson's voiceover or whatever, or Nick Fury's
Spider Man's
briefcase.
a menace, I tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Or the briefcase would open, and there'd be like a, nuclear launch code, and things you just be able to click around.
Okay, no, seriously, they need to hire you because toys are boring now.
Right, but it was a fun idea, and Grimworks was totally into it. We were talking about it, and I might have even written, like the framework of one. And and they weren't meant to tell the story. They were just like these clickable little, like I said, widgety things that you'd play around with. And I think, no matter what you did with the nuclear code, suddenly there was an accidental missile launch, that kind of thing. And like, and then you'd have like a detonate button, and so it'd be the quirky, like playing around with like little spy toys. But then they pulled the plug on the whole like cyber, group, and stopped doing any of the stuff. The stories, included.
Well, wasn't that like what, late 90s or so? Wasn't that when the
Yeah, like I said, it was like
bankruptcy?
that restructuring and
Yeah.
bankruptcy and
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I think these were around. I mean, these would have been
90, I want to say it
after.
was 96 to 2000 or 97
Yeah,
to
yeah,
2000.
because these would have done. I would have done these after the collapse. Like after they laid off a lot of people. And everything was kind of like,
Mm.
dodgy, and it was hard to get work, and blah blah blah. So that would have been in the zone where there's already been the collapse of sort of like the industry. Now,
Yeah, and I think they tried to move it to some online comic book store in '99, which is probably why a lot of stuff got lost.
oh,
Like I said,
okay.
it was like a lot of rights issues too going on at that time,
Mm.
with AOL and them like starting their website and wanting to use them, and they had to make like a separate thing. It was quite annoying, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was
So
out of that.
yeah, this was like a kind of like, it was like, ooh, if they would have just kind of stuck it out until a little bit after, I think this would have really been something like a long a staple.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little too soon.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it was too soon in that way, but um,
I'm surprised they never went back to the swell, but it probably was a nightmare coordinating it.
I don't know. It didn't. It was a small operation. Like I said, it was. It was the writer. It was the creative team. It was an editor. There might have been an assistant. There was a developer. I mean, it was a kind of a little bit of a guerrilla operation. In that way, it didn't feel like it was overly complicated. It wasn't a 50-person development team. It was one guy, as far as I know, doing all the
Wow.
development. So it was, definitely that maybe he had an assistant or maybe he had a little couple people in his shop. But I always got the impression from when I talked to him before and afterwards, because I ran into him online, afterwards on Twitter or something like that. Just said, hey, I used to work with you on those things, and
Oh,
um,
for Grimworks?
yeah,
Oh, Gary Schaefer, is that who you're referring to, maybe?
yeah, maybe, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot the his real name, but Grimworks was always how he billed himself. But
Well, yeah, this is his company.
yeah,
I would
well,
imagine,
that's it.
and that's how people back in the day used to. They'd
Yeah,
have that
yeah,
one little cool call
one
sign.
one cool name. But no, he was very
Like
talented. Yeah,
Costanza.
yeah, and he was always super enthused about things, and very made stuff work.
I
Like
wonder
in
what
that.
he's up to.
Yeah, yeah, no, good guy. I mean, good good developer, but like may have been hit by the
The
changeover with
2000,
director
yeah,
and
the bubble.
Flash and everything else, the same way. But how does it hold up, from a reading point of view, like as a story? Like, does it come across even in this sort
It's
of like
still fun.
fragmented way?
Oh, I liked it. Yeah.
It's very nostalgic for me. So maybe I have
Hmm.
my nostalgia goggles,
No,
but
I
I
liked
like
it.
that. I think it holds up. I think it's fun. Like I said, it's just something that you just don't see every day.
Right, right.
Yeah, no, I liked it. Again, I like. Yeah, if you're up for it, I'd love to do more of these.
Definitely the Blade one. I would love
Yeah, the
to.
Blade ones, I like them all. I mean, and there were a chance to work with like characters that I mean, I had never worked with all the X-Men in that way before. I had done just a little bit of Spidey stuff, so this is a full-on Spidey story with a great villain. Fury obviously I'd done, but that was a great way to dive back into it. The Daredevil one actually used a story element I had been wanting to use forever and had planned to use, which was the synesthesia stuff. So I got to squeeze that in there, and uh, and then the Cap one, yeah, I'd never worked really with Iron Man that much, so that was a so they all had something extra for me, where I got to kind of play a little bit more.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'd love to get through them all, but yeah, stuff like the Spider-Man one and the Iron Man. Well, yeah, I'd love to do that for characters like you weren't necessarily associated with a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and it was a good way to kind of get in their heads and suddenly like play it out. And that's in some ways I remember really liking this X-Men one and the Spidey one because they were double nostalgia now, right? They're both the 90s cyber whatever, but they were also the earlier iterations of the characters.
hmm
So to me at least getting into it, um it was a lot less baggage and a lot more fun with a teenage Spidey and just being able to play the high notes of a grumbly Jay Jonah and and the angst-ridden teen Spidey just trying to get a shot at the beach or whatever, than being burdened by anything else. And I got to use Sandman instead of Carnage, obviously, by doing the earlier one. Always get our Carnage reference in.
I'll do it. Just no carnage.
Exactly. But that would be, think about a story like that though, where like, a Venom story, Carnage, I can't remember what his weakness is at this point after he's mutated so many times, but where you get to ring the bell, right? You get to swing the bell and the gong, gong,
Oh
gong,
yeah,
like knocks Venom out of service or whatever. That's I think the fun little riffs that we were trying to go for with some of the things, and maybe you could still feel like you're immersed in a story where you're having some agency. You're not like looking for endless branching. You're not looking for a choose your own adventure where it can go off into like 50 places, but you have some involvement, and in that way it becomes a little video game-ish, I guess, but
Yeah, I'm
it's not.
surprised Punisher they didn't have a Punisher story. That just always
Yeah.
It
Floors
was the
me.
90s.
Right. And that would have been cool because then you could have just kept like adding more and more bullet holes to the screen. And by the time you got to the end of the story, like there was nothing really left of the screen except like one little like opening where Frank finally notices you, and then he does this stodgy little stop motion look and raises his gun. But I'm playing this Indiana Jones game now. This Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which is this new Indiana Jones video game. But oddly enough, I didn't know what to expect of it going in because they kept making big points about the whip cracking, gun shooting, slugging this, of it, and all that's in there. But it's interesting that it's from a first-person point of view, and I would say a good 70% of the game is, at least the way I'm playing it, you're kind of exploring things, which feels actually really right for this archaeologist, So you're moving through the story, and then you're doing your Indiana Jones sort of things where you have to discover the missing piece to this and insert it there and rotate that so the tomb doors open and that kind of thing. So it has that feeling of advancing the story, which things like this we're trying to kind of achieve, and maybe there's still a place for that, where again you're not doing an endlessly branching story, but you're putting the reader, the audience, in some sort of interactive role to help move it along.
I think you need to pitch it. I think this needs to be a thing. So I think you need to go somewhere and pitch it.
I'll get right on CB and say, like black armor, cyber black armor.
No,
Oh,
so
cyber armor.
serious.
interactive
Don't
black
joke.
armor.
Don't
Yes.
joke.
No, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
for the next volume, you should like, yeah, we should really do a cyber comic to pitch it.
Right.
Hey, the next 2 months from now, they're gonna be looking for Daredevil content. That's all I'm saying.
That's right. They should be, and everyone. How'd you guys like the trailer? Yes, no.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm down for it. Yeah.
A lot of helmets.
It eased some of my worries. I'll tell you that.
Were you worried?
A little bit, especially when they cut it down to from the 18 episodes, and like because they were restructuring behind the scenes and stuff. So it was a lot of things. So I was just like,
Right.
okay.
Right.
And then the trailer, like, because some of the trailers haven't really hooked me, I'll be honest, for the shows. But this one, I was like, okay. I'm ready for March 4th. I'm ready.
Yeah, I didn't have any issues. Didn't like. I still have some. The beats don't feel quite right with Captain America. Quite right to me. Like it's a bit off. I'm hopeful for it, but all the beats in this one, felt right.
Oh, Lilith, let's shame him in public. Yeah, we're going to be covering every episode. Would you like to join us? We're looking for guests. Would you like to join us
just
for an
like
episode?
whatever episode tickles your fancy.
Sure. Yeah. I'll just. Where's the black armor though? Where's the black armor? It must be in the next episode. No, that'd be fun. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great if they actually did like have even like just a quick shot of the black armor, and Dan's like, I didn't get paid for that shit.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We didn't get paid. We didn't get paid for the Midnight Sun stuff, and that was like egregious. Like that was like they kept making such a big point. Oh yeah, Lilith and her Lilith, and like, where do you think this came from? Like, I sent the note to Chris and Howard. And, Land's like, "Did you get anything for this? Nope. You get a free video game for this? Nope.
Not even a free video.
Not even a free video.
Oh
game.
man,
Not even that. It's like, so it's okay. I got plenty of other things to play.
But I just wanted to ask you: is it all right if I share that YouTube link so people can check out?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, by all means, share some screenshots and the link or whatever you want to do. People are encouraged to check it out. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do enjoy it, let these guys know. Let me know.
So I see that Axel's Infernal down there in your little tagline. Are you trying to tell us something?
I'm telling you.
We should choose for pre-launch, Lilith. Don't you know that?
Exactly. So yes. So like yes, in the Get Off My Ass, 2025. That URL, tinyurl.com/Axel's Infernal will take you to the pre-launch page for issue 2 of Axel's Infernal. So you can watch a trailer created much in the way that we were talking about. That kind of gives you a little kick for what the story is, some preview things. There's no commitment at this point. You're not putting any money down. We're just trying to kind of gather names and get up, some interest around the book overall before we go into launch mode. So folks would check it out. sign up for some notifications for when we do launch, share it around. That would be good to help get the news out. And if you see one of my posts on most any social media thing, share it around as well. That would be helpful. And my news.
Are you on Blue Sky yet?
I am on Blue Sky.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on everything except I'm still on Twitter. But because I use a social media like management thing to kind of like do a lot of my posts at once, and they are overcharging
for the API
everyone
access.
To use the API. So I respond to things, but I've sort of like dialed down like new posts just for that reason, because I don't really have the energy to go directly to Elon land just to post there. So at some point I may step back from it. I feel I've stepped back from it in terms of posting actively, but I'm on everywhere else. And also, I've relaunched my newsletter with lots of new content, including pretty much every month. I'm being not every month, every week, a bit of a shill for Axel's Infernal, and doing as I should, and doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff of the development and things from the original proposal, and story notes between me and Carl, just to kind of give folks more of a glimpse of what it's about. So that would maybe encourage some folks to want to do that pre-launch sign up.
All right. So yes, kids.
Cool.
Yeah,
very excited for issue 2.
Yes, we want to talk all about it and read it.
Yes, I've read it. It's pretty good. And it's
I just read the greatest comic script ever. Who wrote it? I did.
It actually made me rewrite parts of 4 and 5.
Oh.
Which Carl doesn't know yet, but
you have to redo that.
Nobody tell Carl.
Well, with Carl's, it's not like he's drawn it yet, so it's okay. But it's as you go through it, you recognize certain things about the way characters should operate that it helps you rethink the way that you want the character to represent themselves, and the actions they need to take, and the agency they need to have, so that they stay strong characters or grow as characters throughout. They can't just be reactive, and right now she's a little too reactive in the last 2 issues, and there's ways to make her a little stronger.
For next episode and everyone going forward, I'll have an infographic to put up on the screen for Axel Infernal. Don't you worry.
Oh, awesome! All right, very cool.
All right.
Phil loves his graphics.
Hey, man, if the streamer lets you do it, why not?
Exactly. No, this was cool. Thanks for this walk down cyber lane.
Oh yeah, I think we both definitely want to get back to these cyber comics, but I was thinking next month we'll throw a little bone finally. Maybe get into the Sliders.
Oh wow, yeah, Sliders is really cool. Sliders is definitely interesting. I heard that I heard Jerry O'Connor was trying to relaunch. I
wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, I heard that he was trying to do something with it.
Well, yeah, what's he doing? I think he's doing one of those daytime talk shows or something.
Yeah, and he's actually pretty good at it. I will give him that. I was very surprised. Like, he had taken over for Wendy Williams a while ago, and I was very surprised with how well he handled it. So, yeah, I never thought of him as a talk show host, but he's been doing a good job. Good for him.
No, I mean,
he's happy for him.
He's a good. I think he's a decent talent. He's good. I mean, I like what I read about it was he wants to do the. Go back and do it in the zone of the first 2 seasons, before it kind of got all.
That'd be smart.
Yeah, just focus on that before they denigrated the professor and upgraded the breasts and all the other stuff. So, and, but yeah, those are fun books to work on.
They're so good. I'm glad you you decided to do some Sliders, Phil.
It looks like the first 3 issues. So what? Sliders 1 through 3, I guess.
Well, each one was a limited series. So
yeah, I was looking at the list. It says just Sliders, and then there was like 2 miniseries or something.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just Sliders, not Sliders, Dark, whatever.
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll talk.
We'll do that, and then because I dare you to guess what we're going to cover in March and April.
I don't know.
Dare you.
We'll find something. We'll find. I might be blind to that, but we'll find.
Oh. He knows how to play.
Excellent. All right, guys. Always a fun way to start my Saturday. I appreciate you guys very much. Thank you for this, and we will catch up sometime in February.
Yes. Thank you
All
for your
right.
time, as always. All right.
All right, folks. Enjoy your weekend. Be good.
Never.
Never.
All right, kids. Yeah. So find all that DG Chichester stuff, Axel's Infernal, the newsletter, and of course, yeah, like I said, I'll put the in the show notes the link to the YouTube for all the cyber comics. But now we got the permit.
Shameless.
That's right. So yeah, send us all your thoughts and questions and things. CapesandLunatics@gmail.com or call the voicemail 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES. And remember, you can find all episodes from the Capes and Lunatics, even stuff prior, pretty much our complete podcasting history at CapesLunatics.wordpress.com. Buy some merch at TeePublic or Spring websites. And again, of course, if you don't want to end up a strange smell in the basement, Lilith Hellfire demands that you ran the money on us through the Cash App link.
It's a gentle suggestion.
Gentle with a baseball bat. And of course, the Patreon, where Lilith and I give you exclusive, uncensored content every month. And if you are a patron, and if you're nice like Justin, you can send in suggestions, or we can always shame you like we did with Ray. So yes, tell us what to do. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be comics, as long as it's legal. Yes, make the suggestion and subscribe at patreon.com/capesandlunatics. And of course, as Lil said, she's on Blue Sky. I'm on Blue Sky. The Capes Lunatics Podcast Network's on Blue Sky. DG Chichester's on Blue Sky. Will Allred's on Blue Sky. So yeah, we're all making the move.
Feels like old Twitter. I kind of like it.
Yeah. Because isn't there someone behind that? So like, who?
It's the guy that used to, he used to work. He used to work at Twitter. Yeah. But there's another. They're all basically almost everybody that has like a Twitter clone used to work at Twitter. So
yeah,
that's the gag.
And plus, yeah, it's not as crazy over there. So
not yet. Fingers crossed.
Well, not yet. Yeah. Hopefully they keep an eye on that. All right. Yes, thank you for joining us, kids. Come back next time for Sliders, and then, like I said, I dare you to try to guess what we're going to cover in March and April with a former Daredevil writer.
Some more Batman.
What the Ray? What the F? Yeah, I definitely do want to get to those cyber comics.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah,
good choice.
No, they're good, and plus, yeah, like I said, we give us
history,
time to
baby.
Yeah, to talk to him about characters he would usually as an
normally
associate.
Didn't get to write, yeah.
All right, that's it for this time. You can get back on the phone now.